Today, we go back to Twitter to actually discuss something that I think is a very nuanced topic. Now, of course, the platform doesn't lead people to have these nuanced conversations in very productive manners, and that's not to the fault of the people partaking in the conversation. That's really the fault of the platform itself. But I do think we have kind of a lot to dig into behind a lot of the responses from this topic that have a lot of variables intertwined, from our changing economic experiences. What does community mean to both the fighting game community itself and I think like the Western world and America specifically at large, and how our life experiences have really shaped our expectations and how we really even connect with each other. And I'll be sharing my own experience with this topic as well after we get through some of the takes on Twitter. This was all spurred from this tweet from Candle here, who said, if you're wondering why your local scene is dying and you're charging $15 a week, that is the problem. If you aren't a top high-level player, you are essentially throwing that money away every week, and that financial burden on a player is huge. It turns so many people off. And a lot of people were upset by this, and I can kind of understand why they were upset at first glance, because Candle here is often framing this discussion as basically, you're going to locals to farm people as a way to make income. And for context, yes, Candle is mostly speaking from the perspective of someone from the Smash community. But before you immediately throw your arms and then you go, oh, of course, typical Smash community. Listen, the Smash community actually kind of shits on the FGC in terms of supporting their locals through a number of factors, which I'll get into. A lot of it being based on literally the fact that the games don't have a good netcode. Like Smash Ultimate, you actually literally have to play offline. And it really kind of reminds me of the pre-2015 FGC in that sense, where like rollback netcode wasn't standard, at least in Capcom games, and you essentially had to play offline to get the real experience. And also the scene is younger as well. So there's a lot of different factors that go into play here, but their local scene is dying down. But top players literally used to make a living going to locals. I think pre-COVID is great examples of this. Locals all across the country, not just in New York and California, where you would find like the major local happenings, and in Chicago as well. Shout out to Ignite for like the FGC centered locals. Smash top players, the games were very consistent, and they would just beat the crap out of other like 18-year-old kids, and like they would farm locals and actually make hundreds of dollars a week of consistent income from like 80 to 100 man locals. That was seriously normal. If you ever actually talk to any top Smash players, you can understand that this was really a thing. So this idea of farming locals was really alive, and to a much later degree, because this used to exist in the traditional FGC for quite some time, especially like earlier on in the Street Fighter 4 era and pre-Street Fighter 4 era. Top players used to divvy up which locals they would go to or which tournaments they would go to, because like the top players were so much better than the rest of the field. Like, let's be real, the games were harder, information was harder to come by. So if you had an edge back in the day, it was so much harder for people to catch up to you that you could more easily like divvy up the regions you competed in between other top players and farm them. Essentially, this was super common. Now to farm, you have to be Knuckle or Punk winning TNS. You just actually have to be the best in the country to win the money now, essentially from locals. But back then, you could be the best in your state, best in your city, and you could make some money here and there farming locals. Smash still has a bit of that culture alive, which is where you're seeing this kind of perspective coming from. Hey, I'm a medium level, top level player in my city or state. If I'm going to spend these $15, I better be making a return on my investment. And that can leave a bad taste in people's mouths, because it's like you're looking at the community as your piggy bank, right? So I understand a little bit of where the negativity comes from this, because there was a lot of negativity, such as, it's B who says, go to your local, right? That was one side of the responses from this tweet. A more like, supporting what they believe in, which is that you should go to your locals and connect with the community. But a lot of the other responses were more of this tone: get a job. There was a lot of responses like this. You can't afford $15 to support your community and your scene and hang out in a physical space and enjoy your hobby and support the TOs that are organizing the events. Fitted Cap here says, I'll say it. I can't, for some reason, my eyes are blurry here, but I can make out the rest. People, I think they're trying to say, need a job. There's legitimate grievances to complain about in this economic landscape, but $15 every other week for your local, something, get off supercombo.com and go to indeed.com instead. Your priorities are all... Yeah, there's a lot of get a job type responses, because $15 is definitely not that high of a price to pay for, adults. with jobs and like, depending on the age group that you're talking about, it's not. It depends on your own economic position. But if you are at a certain age, getting by in society, you probably have a job. You can afford to pay $15 to support something that you both find entertainment in and understand the sense of giving back to your own community. So there's definitely some validity in that response as well. Mascus here says, more discourse about locals having to pay for a venue, I sleep. The fact that I am at risk of seeing a 14-year-old's opinion at any time of the day on the internet is a human rights violation. I think this is a big part of it. The internet has had us, like, people from all sorts of demographics and age groups combined under one space, and the FGC is really experiencing that, and I think that's a big part of it. Smash community, tends to trend younger than FGC. It's true. There are people who partake in fighting games who are not of working age adults. They are not. I mean, when I first started going to fighting games, or fighting game events, I was in college as a broke college student. I didn't have $15 a week to spend on events. So there is sort of this weird meshing of like, we're all on a megaphone on Twitter talking to the world at once, and humans were not meant to communicate that way. Long form content like this, like you said, a lot of context and give a lot of exclusions and help you narrow down the focus to give context to what you're saying so people can't like misconstrue what you're talking about. But on Twitter, it's not like that. If you're 16 years old and you're a Smash player and you don't have $15 a week to spend at a local, I totally understand that, and we'll get more into that later. But yeah, if you're an adult and you pay for Netflix all the time and you are not drowning in debt and you are complaining about spending $15 at a local to support your community for something you enjoy and you're doing it at a public venue, then yeah, I kind of agree. Like, you're not really understanding the value of what's going on there, and you might sound a little entitled. So I think there's a lot of nuance there. Hungry Box chimes in, Candle, I know you mean well by this tweet, but as someone who has hosted local tournaments for a decade in the past, I'd like for you to try hosting a weekly every week for a few months for free and see for yourself what the end result is. Hosting a physical space for people to actually meet up and play costs a lot of money. If you're renting a venue and then you're also trying to provide setups and any other kind of fees that are associated with that, it is hundreds to thousands of dollars. And you're probably not making a return. Now, that's not to say I did see some responses from TOs who said they actually did make returns from hosting events from physical spaces that they were running events in. I couldn't find the tweets, unfortunately, but one that was running a barcade, for example, who said on event days, we bring in more income because more people show up to our venue, and therefore we sell more alcohol, more food items, venue fees, whatever, and it draws more people in. And we actually make more money running events than not running events. So once again, it all depends, right? And a lot of people were just, trying to shift the focus back onto what they felt was the more important aspect of it. Guile Winquote here says, a good local is not just a bracket. And I think that was people's initial issue with the first tweet, was that it was treating the local as a bracket where you are investing money to make a financial return. And that was the only value you're getting out of it. Because, yeah, I agree, locals are not a bracket. A tournament bracket might be a feature of a local, and it's one of the draws. But I think that the concept of having enough value for people to show up is often not understood by both the community members who want to go to the local and sometimes from the TOs itself. Because, yeah, I agree. If you're just going for a tournament and there's no casual setups after, there's not an accommodating space, there's nothing to kind of encourage a social budding dynamic between the community members there, then yeah, it ends up being just a bracket. And I think that's the worst value of any event you go to. If your tournament, even major tournaments that are only just brackets, it's a top-heavy reward structure. If you go 0-2, you're kicked out of the bracket. If there's nothing else for you to do, why did you pay to show up? In that case, then yes, literally the only reason you showed up was to play in the tournament and potentially make a reward from winning it, right? So good locals, in my mind, encourage having a lot of social connection and allow people to play casuals. It's just like the water cooler that people gather around, right? You need to provide that space for people to actually share common interests, and that's kind of like the social lube, really, beyond just people getting wasted at a bar. That allows people to have a common interest, something to organize an activity around, and to then discuss, share interests, and connect with each other. So I definitely agree that a local is not just a bracket, a good local at least, right? So if you're at a local that is not providing that for you in some way, then I do agree that maybe it might not be worth it. So that's why I kind of understand the competitive nature of having to make people's time and money actually be worth attending the local. Like there is, a value proposition here, right? And I sometimes think these complaints might be worded in a really harsh and negative way, like talking about the local as not being worth the time, the money investment because you don't make a return. That's a pretty, not a great way to phrase it. But to argue maybe I'm not getting enough socialization out of this, I'm not in a place where I can feel connected with people, that's a more valid complaint that maybe organizers can look at to help make it more worth people's time and money to show up to support. Chris F here says, $15 a week to make lifelong friends, slap some buttons, and maybe become really good at something you love. Sounds pretty good to me. I wouldn't be making FGC content if it wasn't for my locals. Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially the older members of the FGC like myself, were able to get that start due to having offline locals to attend. If you were blessed enough to be able to make that connection, it really made becoming a person who was both competent and understood fighting games and enjoyed them a lot easier. Like, I don't think I would be able to, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have locals at like University of Florida, for example, when I was going to school, to help show me the ropes really with Street Fighter and get connected with the greater FGC at the time. iDrop here says, locals aren't just about the tournament, it's about the experiences and the friends you make along the way. Yeah, iDrop is a regular attendee of NLBC. There's Henry Sen there giving him a haircut literally in the NLBC venue itself. There's some people hanging out there playing some games. Got the mahjong going. So yeah, it helps people find a connection. And I mean, not every place is New York. Not every place has NLBC. Some people don't have these opportunities to make these kind of connections. But it's definitely something that people value when they do manage to have that place where they can actually form a community. And this really brings me to, I think, the other side of this discussion. Yosi dropped a really personal story here, which I'll share, which I think touches on the other side of like the viewpoint of, oh, you don't have $15 to spare to support your community. Yosi says, the reaction to this $15 tweet is genuinely pissing me off. I have a story for you. 13 years ago, I was bordering on homelessness, doing 14 hours a day in the art studio, working my part-time job, and playing fighting games in my free time. Even though the power may have been out at my apartment, I always remember being able to go to my local. I had friends pick me up, or I'd take the bus. I went without eating sometimes to afford to play, but I went because the FGC was home. It was part of who I was. I have a distinct memory of going to my local, and we went to McDonald's after. I couldn't afford anything. I had food stamps, food at home, and I couldn't buy food, and a player noticed I was like 110 pounds and bought food for me. I don't even know what that dude's name was. The house game sessions and the locals healed me. It gave me just enough joy to work for a better future. The FGC took care of me, man, emotionally, spiritually, physically. When I see people post shit like, if you can't afford $15 for a venue fee, you have bigger problems, you forget who we are. We are a community, and that includes the broke motherfuckers among us. Sometimes fighting games is the only thing people have in life. Understand that. I get that TO's got to eat. They charge. $15 a head is fine. But do not ever imply someone is too broke to be a member of the FGC because they cannot afford it. As always, shoutouts to Tong Never Sleeps for building the community that helped take care of me for so many years. Really personal story from Yosi, who is now, successful, both competitor in fighting games and working on 2XKO now. Really survived this journey in part from the support from the FGC. And that brings me to the other side of it, which is people's time and money is extremely valuable, and we're all at different places in our lives, and we have this cross-generational community that we call the FGC, comprised of many different peoples from many different backgrounds and many different economic groups and age demographics, right? And so it's really hard to speak for everybody all at once at the same time. And that's where I think a lot of these discussions lose their nuance on Twitter, because yeah, not everyone has money to particularly spend on hobbies, but they also do deserve a place to form community. This is a problem we're seeing not just in the FGC, but all over, especially in America, that we're losing third places, places where we can go to hang out, to socialize. These places are becoming increasingly more pricey, have a higher barrier to entry. You pretty much have to pay to hang out anywhere. You want to go to a bar, you got to pay to get in there. You want to hang out at McDonald's, you got to pay. There's very few places where you can actually socialize in a place and not be expected to pay for being in that physical space. Where do you go if you're like a 17-year-old kid and you want to hang out, play video games, or whatever? You can't really go anywhere. Even if you go to the park, right? I mean, this is like a bigger socioeconomic discussion, but you might end up getting noise complaints, or people complain that you're hanging out there being too rowdy with your friends. Back in my day, we used to just go to the mall and wander. That's where our parents would drop us off. That was our third place. We had no money to spend on any of the stores or activities there, but we're so starved for having places to hang out that literally just wandering around the mall was the thing to do so that kids had something to experience. And we're losing these third places all over the place, and they're becoming increasingly more expensive for the American people. And, a lot of the other things going on now are like a lot of these third places are becoming 21 and up establishments because the way for the economics to work out for these venues is they make their money through alcohol sales. So we're seeing the rise of barcades. A lot of these locals end up being at 21 plus venues where they're serving alcohol. What does someone who's 19 years old do in order to partake in the FGC? They might be broke, they might be a student, they might be down on their luck in between employment, and they can't even enter the venue if they wanted to or could afford to because they're not 21 plus. So this is a consistent theme that's happening where we have less and less opportunities to socialize. Hosting venues at scale has become increasingly difficult. But, it wasn't always like that. And in fact, it used to be a lot more, intimate in the FGC. Back in my day, we also used to connect via Facebook fighting game groups, local fighting game groups. Here's the South Florida FGC. They organize this photo opportunity every CEO as like their kind of moment to gather yearly, everyone in one place to take a photo. Shout out to Ryan down there in the front. So this is from the South Florida FGC, which I used to really be a part of. I've kind of, I've been gone for a decade almost at this point. I don't have as much connection to the current faces in the scene. But one of my first fighting game groups online was the South Florida FGC Facebook group, and I would meet up with players through the events organized on this group. Sometimes they'd be at actual LAN centers and places where you had to pay to get into, but a lot of the time, it was people's houses. It was people's apartments. I was going to strangers' apartments to play fighting games, and this was just the era we were in. You did not have suitable rollback netcode. If you wanted to play the real game, you essentially had to find a place to play offline and meet up with real people in order to play. So when I was doing this, I was at the University of Florida. And, I was a broke student. I'm in debt. I had some scholarships to help me out, but I'm in debt. I don't have cash. Eventually got a part-time job to help offset some of my basic expenses while a student. But, we would actually have a lot of events from the Gainesville FGC Facebook group, and we would even just be in the classrooms themselves. I might have played Street Fighter literally in this exact classroom. This is one of the buildings. I think this was like the computer science building. We had meetups in these classrooms sometimes. Somehow someone from the group was able to swing getting access as like a club for some of these classrooms occasionally. But of course, a lot of the time we were at like people's student apartments hosting, and someone would host and we would grab our gear and bring our own setups. And this is how we would actually meet up for free. Someone would host once a week. We would say, oh, who's hosting this week on this day? And we would try to organize where everyone would go and try to make sure that we brought enough setups for enough people to hang out and play some Street Fighter or play some fighting games. And part of my standard loadout, this was my loadout. I would carry around in my JanSport backpack, I would have my Xbox 360 in there, original model that did not have an HDMI output, only the RGB cables. I had my Street Fighter Cross Tekken stick, and I had a 13-inch Sony CRT. I don't think it was this exact model, but this bad boy I loved. I mean, playing 360 Street Fighter 4 analog output on this CRT, mwah. I mean, the analog gaming, the low input delay, I still think that was the most crisp, premium, low input delay, low latency Street Fighter I've ever played in my entire life. Felt amazing. But this CRT, this thing is like this deep. I'm holding it with the screen against my chest and stomach with the weight distribution to try to keep it like leaning back so the weight is kind of resting on my core. Put the stick on top of the TV itself, like you see here in the picture, with the console in the backpack and a bag of trail mix or something in there. That was my loadout. I would drive around in my 91 GMC Sierra, one cab old school truck. That would be what I would drive around to these meetups and load it up and go to every single event, every single meetup that I possibly could for free, essentially. I didn't have any money. That's just what I did. And eventually got to the point where I would even host myself because I saw a problem with the value proposition for doing some of our bracket locals. Eventually got to the point where it was like me and JC, my mentor at the time, winning everything at the University of Florida locals. And I noticed that attendance was starting to dip. So I started the Monday night Rambat series And here's some old school challenge brackets where it was a Rambat series where everybody played everybody round robin. And I eventually hosted this at my own apartment. I told my 2 roommates, I was like, hey, on Monday night, a bunch of strangers are going to be in our living room playing video games. It was kind of a hard thing to sell to them. And yeah, we even had, 9 people? 10 people showed up to the 1.4 event, and it gave a chance for everybody to play everybody, so that everybody got a lot of games in. There's a little bit of stakes at hand so that people felt like a little bit involved and cared a little bit about their performance. And the cost to entry was, I said, hey, if you got some beer, bring it, bring some chips, something, please bring a setup, right? It was a community-driven effort, and we crammed into my tiny student apartment living room. And I still have the VODs from this. There's me a decade ago trying to set up the stream, getting things set up. I was streaming this from my old student laptop. I had a crappy mixer that I had won. I won some University of Florida tournaments, and I used the Amazon gift card to buy a mixer and a condenser mic, just to have something cheap to use. And that's what I was using on this crappy laptop. Had a setup going, and we would stream. And even then, I got to be able to play on stream, have the community commentate.
But no punish on the
Here's me on the Evil Ryu. Check this out. Me being Baby Daigo. Did you see the whiff punish there? Enter the 1-frame links. Hold up. Oh, I got the links.
And that's the tip too. Like if
you like Daigo at Stunfest 2015, that's Brian F. Evil Ryu 2015. Check that shit out. But yeah, I was really proud of organizing this event, and these locals and events were free. And even then, the university itself, I was super happy to have events to go to as a student for free. Gatorland was a yearly tournament that they ran, and this is me going up against my mentor JC finally at the end of my college career, where I finally managed at the end of it all to get a win. I still have the plaque. I won this tournament. Oh, I guess this one's different. Spring 2015. I have Winter 2015 somewhere in my closet. I gotta bust it out. But Winter 2015 is where I got first place over JC finally. He was like the roadblock at every tournament I ever went to for so long. It was kind of like the passing of the torch for me a little bit. And I was able to partake in all these locals, meet a community, and compete in Street Fighter 4 because it was free and available. And we were building a community that was accessible. And, you know, the university in Gainesville was very pedestrian friendly. You could walk around, get around. So there was a lot of factors that allowed myself and others to meet and compete and form community. But those things don't necessarily exist anymore, right? Once I graduated, I went to Milwaukee, and in Street Fighter 5, I started going to a local in Milwaukee. And that's where I met the Tier 1 Gaming Lounge crew. And they hosted bi-weekly tournaments or weekly tournaments, and they were giving out little league trophies, right? There I am with the first place finish, and you know, it was pretty cute to hand these out. And this is season 1 of Street Fighter 5. I also met this really scrubby Rashid player who only spammed dive kick, and then eventually they picked up Jury, and I guess they qualified for Capcom Cup a few times. I think they go by Just a Child or something like that. But anyways, I went to that local for a while, but at this time, I'm working full time. I'm streaming. My stream's starting to take off. I'm starting to travel to tournaments. The netcode, while not perfect, is rollback, and like the competition online was stronger. I eventually kind of made the choice to stop attending the local. That was a conscious decision that I made at some point, and it's a little selfish, isn't it? Like, I kind of made a selfish decision where I said, okay, like, for my time, I get more practice from higher level competition online, more quality practice, and I'm building my stream. I'm making more revenue potentially from the stream that I'm building up here. And I kind of made the vote with my time to stay home and stream. Eventually, I stopped going to the local, and eventually they closed. So am I guilty of that same thought process of like hyper optimizing your own value proposition for making a return, getting into that competitive mindset of like, I need to win no matter what it costs me? Yeah, a little bit. I'm guilty of it, right? I didn't support my local. There was definitely, I could have done more, and I chose not to. I chose to focus on myself. Now, do I regret it? Not entirely. I don't entirely regret it, but you know, I wish I could have done more as well. But this is the reality that people face. So on top of having the economic proposition of not having access to things, once I was in a position to economically support whatever I wanted because I was working, I had to vote with my time. And as an adult who has income now, $15, I can afford that every week to support a local. Can I afford the time? I would pay $15 to have those hours back to my schedule, right? I would pay $100 if I can get 3 hours back on a random week, on a random Monday, random Friday. I would pay for that. So at a certain point, it also becomes like the other end of the spectrum, where finally you're in a position to spend the money to enjoy what you want to enjoy and partake in community, but then you can no longer find the time. So it becomes a really difficult thing to balance. When people who have all the time in the world don't have the money to enjoy these community efforts, and then people who might have the money don't have the time. So I'm kind of just rambling here, but these are just reflections I've had with how like our local events begin to deteriorate. And it's hard to justify the value proposition to anybody and just the way our society is set up, right? You need money. We need community. We need time. And things are also changing. So on top of that, like a big part of that was I was allowed to compete in the Street Fighter V era online because of the increase in quality netcode, right? I didn't have to go to find other people locally to play the game. I could play online and get great competition from a much wider pool of players. And that's kind of where a lot of our community has gone. Especially, I mean, that already started in the 2015, 2016 era, but it was, catapulted by COVID out of necessity. And now for many people who are younger and don't have that much income and might not be in the best economic situation, their third place is Discord. They play games online with their friends on Discord. And also we have, things like Tampa Never Sleeps. We have these online events now where people are getting competition weekly against the best players in the country. If I was only concerned about playing the best players possible, and I had a local on Wednesday or Tampa Never Sleeps would objectively give me better competition. You can't compete with that on that front, right? You just can't. You have access to the best players in North America weekly from home for free with Tampa Never Sleeps. The local can't compete in terms of that. It's just impossible. So what can they compete in terms of providing community, in terms of providing social value, right? In terms of making connections between the people. So that's the way that, these offline events have to market themselves, have to try to capture their audience in that manner. And it's just the expectations have changed. They've totally changed. I mean, even with the Evo Awards, Best Local now includes a lot of online events, TNS Online, Casa Bunch. So we have offline events with, Junior, I never know how to say the name. Tatakai, Tuesday, NLBC, and Abo Dojo. I'm so sorry I'm butchering these names. I don't mean the disrespect. All respect to the people organizing these events. But I honestly feel like TNS Online is going to win this. And they've done an amazing thing for the community. And many people don't even physically have access to these offline places. As more things become outpriced from both the audience trying to attend events and from the TOs themselves, more venues shut down, where do people go? They gravitate online. It's just more accessible. So at the end of the day, I kind of understand a lot of sides of this discussion point about locals. It's really hard to find the time or the money, depending on where you are in life, to justify going to these things or to even have access to them in the first place. And on the other hand, it's super hard to run these events. It's an impossible Herculean task to provide a community and support it and provide a place for people to meet. It's so difficult for everyone involved. I don't really have a solution to this. All I know is I blame the automobile industry for lobbying the government to destroy our infrastructure and to turn it into just giant highway cities for us to drive cars through in isolating suburbs so that we no longer have communities. Thanks for watching.